I was only 20 when my life changed forever. The day my daughter was born should have been the happiest day of my life. I remember lying on the hospital bed, weak and exhausted, but smiling as the nurse placed the tiny bundle in my arms. She was so small, so fragile, her little fingers curling around mine. "My baby," I whispered, tears sliding down my cheeks. My husband, Armin, stood beside the bed. At first he smiled too, but when the doctor spoke, everything changed. The doctor cleared his throat gently. "Your daughter is healthy, but there is something you should know." My heart suddenly began racing. "She has a condition that affects her speech. It's possible she may never be able to speak." The room felt silent. I looked down at my baby again. She blinked slowly, her innocent eyes staring back at me. To me, she was perfect. But the moment my mother-in-law heard the news, everything turned into a nightmare. When we returned home from the hospital, she didn't even let me enter properly. "What kind of child did you bring into this house?" she shouted loudly. I froze at the doorway. My baby started crying in my arms. "Amy, please," Armin said softly. But she ignored him completely. "A useless girl who cannot even speak. This is bad luck. This is your fault," she yelled, pointing her finger at me. My chest tightened. "How is it my fault?" I whispered. But she wasn't interested in logic. In her mind, I was guilty. For the next few days, life inside that house became unbearable. Every morning I woke up early, cooked breakfast, cleaned the house, and tried to take care of my newborn daughter. But no matter what I did, my mother-in-law found a reason to insult me. "If you had given birth to a normal child, I would have accepted you," she would say. Sometimes she would look at my baby with disgust. "Who will marry a mute girl in the future? She will destroy our family name." Every word felt like a knife cutting through my heart. But what hurt the most was my husband's silence. Armin never defended me. Whenever his mother shouted, he simply lowered his head and stayed quiet. One night, I gathered the courage to talk to him. He was sitting on the bed, scrolling through his phone. "Armin," I said quietly. "Yes? Do you also think our daughter is a burden?" He didn't answer immediately. That silence told me everything. I don't know," he said finally. "Amy is very upset." Tears filled my eyes. "She is our daughter," I whispered. He sighed. "Just give it some time." But time only made things worse. One afternoon, when my daughter was barely 3 weeks old, my mother-in-law entered the room while I was feeding her. She stood there watching us with cold eyes. "Pack your things." I looked up in confusion. "What?" "You heard me," she said. "This house does not need a woman who brings misfortune." My heart dropped. "Amy, please, where will I go?" I asked. "That is not my problem." My hand started shaking. I turned to Armin, who was standing behind her. "Armin, say something." He avoided my eyes. Maybe it's better if you stay with your parents for some time," he muttered. At that moment, something inside me shattered. "Are you serious?" I asked. He didn't answer. My mother-in-law smirked. "See? Even my son agrees." Tears streamed down my face as I hugged my baby tightly. "You're throwing your own granddaughter out," I said. "She is not my granddaughter," she snapped. Those words burned into my memory forever. Within an hour, my small bag was packed. No one helped me. No one stopped me. I walked out of that house with my newborn daughter in my arms and nowhere to go. The evening sky was turning orange as I stood on the street. Cars passed by. People walked around. But my world had completely collapsed. I sat down on a bench near the road, holding my baby close to my chest. She stopped crying and looked at me with her big innocent eyes. "I promise," I whispered to her softly. "I will never abandon you." My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my mother. My hands trembled as I answered. "Hello? Beta, how are you? When are you bringing my granddaughter to visit us? She asked happily. My throat tightened. I couldn't hold my tears anymore. Amy, I cried. What happened? They kicked me out. There was silence for a moment. Then she said firmly, come home. Those 2 words saved me. An hour later, I was sitting in a bus heading toward my parents' small town. My daughter slept peacefully in my arms. I watched the dark road through the window and wondered how my life had changed so quickly. A few weeks ago, I was a married woman living with my husband. Now I was a single mother with a baby everyone called defective. But deep inside my heart, I knew something they didn't. My daughter wasn't a curse. She was my strength. And one day, I would prove them all wrong. But I had no idea that the real struggle was just beginning. The first year after I returned to my parents' house was the hardest time of my life. My parents lived in a small town and we were not rich. My father worked in a small grocery shop, and my mother stitched clothes for neighbors to earn a little extra money. When they saw me standing at the door that night with my newborn daughter in my arms, both of them were shocked. But they didn't ask questions. My mother simply hugged me tightly and said, "You are home now." Those words gave me the strength to keep going. We named my daughter Isla. She had the most beautiful eyes I had ever seen, bright and curious, always observing the world around her. Even though the doctors had said she might never speak, I refused to treat her like something was wrong with her. Instead, I started learning about sign language. Every night after putting Isla to sleep, I watched videos on my phone and practiced hand signs. Milk. Water. Mother. Love. Slowly, I began teaching them to Isla as well. At first she didn't understand anything. But when she turned 1 year old, something incredible happened. One evening she looked at me and made a tiny hand gesture. It was clumsy and incomplete, but I recognized it instantly. She was trying to sign Mama. Tears filled my eyes. "My smart girl," I whispered, kissing her forehead. From that day onward, Isla started learning quickly. By the time she was 3 years old, she could understand dozens of signs and communicate with me perfectly. People in our town, however, were not so kind. Some neighbors would whisper when they saw us. "That is the girl whose husband abandoned her. Her child cannot even talk." Those words hurt, but I stopped caring. My entire world revolved around Isla. When she turned 5, I enrolled her in a small school. The principal looked uncertain when I explained her condition. "We have never taught a mute child before," he admitted. I looked him straight in the eyes. "She is not weak. She just communicates differently." After a long pause, he finally nodded. "All right. We will try." The first few months were difficult. Some children teased her because she couldn't speak. But Isla was stronger than they expected. Instead of crying, she focused on her studies. She loved drawing more than anything. Her notebooks were always filled with beautiful sketches, flowers, animals, houses, people smiling. Her art teacher once called me to school. "I have been teaching for 20 years, she said while showing me Isla's drawings. "I have rarely seen a child with this much talent." My heart swelled with pride. At home, I encouraged her passion. Even though we didn't have much money, I bought cheap colors and papers for her. "Draw whatever you want," I told her. And she did. Years passed. I worked small jobs to support us, tutoring children, sewing clothes, helping in a local store. It wasn't easy, but every time I looked at Isla, I remembered why I was fighting so hard. When she turned 12, something happened that changed our lives. Her school organized an art competition across the entire district. Hundreds of students participated. Isla spent days preparing her painting. She worked silently in our small room, her fingers moving carefully across the canvas. When she finished, I stared at the painting in shock. It showed a mother holding a small child under a dark stormy sky, but above them, a bright light was breaking through the clouds. The emotion in that painting was unbelievable. What does it mean? I asked her in sign language. She smiled softly and signed back. Us. My eyes filled with tears. On the day of the competition, we traveled to the city for the first time. There were so many participants that I felt nervous for her. But Isla looked calm. When the results were announced, the judge stepped onto the stage. In first place, he said loudly, "The winner of this year's district art competition is..." My heart pounded. Isla Khan. For a moment I thought I heard wrong. But then everyone started clapping. Isla looked at me with wide eyes. You won. I signed excitedly. She ran into my arms, laughing silently while tears streamed down both our faces. That victory changed everything. Her painting was displayed in a local newspaper. People in our town suddenly began talking about her in a different way. That mute girl is very talented. She might become famous one day. Years later, when Isla turned 18, she received a scholarship to study fine arts in a prestigious university in the city. The same people who once pitted us were now praising her. But the biggest shock came one afternoon while we were sitting at home. Someone knocked on our door. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. Standing there was Armin. He looked older, tired, and uncomfortable. What are you doing here? I asked coldly. Behind him stood my former mother-in-law. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she suddenly stepped forward. Where is my granddaughter? She asked. The word granddaughter made my blood boil. You lost the right to call her that, I replied sharply. She lowered her head. We made a mistake. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. A mistake? You threw a newborn baby onto the street. Armin finally spoke. I regret everything, he said quietly. After you left, our lives fell apart. Apparently, his mother had forced him into another marriage. But that marriage ended in divorce within 2 years. Their reputation in the community had also suffered. Please, he said. Let me see Isla. Before I could answer, the door behind me opened. Isla stepped outside. She was now a confident young woman, tall and graceful. She looked at the two strangers in front of her. I signed to her. This is your father and grandmother. For a few seconds she stared at them silently. Then she raised her hands and signed something slowly. They didn't understand sign language, so they looked at me. What did she say? Armin asked nervously. I took a deep breath and translated. She said, family is the people who stay when life is hard. Both of them looked ashamed. And she says, I continued, you left when she needed you the most. Tears rolled down Armin's face. I'm sorry, he whispered. Isla watched him for a moment. Then she gently shook her head. She signed again. What did she say now? His mother asked. I answered calmly. She forgives you. Hope flashed in their eyes. But, I continued, forgiveness does not mean you can come back into our lives. Isla nodded firmly. She then held my hand tightly and smiled at me. In that moment I realized something. The girl they once called a curse had become the greatest blessing of my life. They had abandoned us when we were weak. But together, we had built a life stronger than they could ever imagine. And now, the same daughter they rejected was becoming someone the entire world would admire. As Armin and his mother walked away in silence, Isla squeezed my hand and signed softly. Thank you for never leaving me. I hugged her tightly. I never will.